Hey, thanks for being part of the Remote Features Summit. Today I'm going to talk to you about 10 strategies on how to build a kick-ass, awesome remote team culture. So, hi, my name is Mel. I'm also known as the design nomad. On the nomad side of things, I've been a digital nomad for the last 8 years. So I've been working remotely and traveling for the last 8 years. During that time, I've lived in 3 countries and I've traveled to over 40 more. So I started my first year as a freelancer, and it was through doing that I discovered being a digital nomad was a thing, and it was completely by accident. During which soon I had way too much work and then had to hire. But at the same time, I didn't want to stop traveling because it was a ton of fun. So I was like, all right, well, a remote team it's going to be then. Which brings me to the design side of things, which is that I run Melewi. We're a product UX UI design studio that has been location independent from day one. So, kick-ass design studio with a global perspective. All right, so we've worked with companies from startups to large corporations from around the world, including some of these names. And we've also been lucky enough to have been featured in a couple of these places. So in the last 5 years, we've worked with over 190 clients in 48 cities in every continent but Antarctica, although that's on the list, we'll get there someday. And during that time, we have designed for millions of users. So right now on the team, we have 7 people across 6 countries, across 4 continents, and all in all, we speak 16 languages, and I have to say that they are also some of the most awesome people, some of the nicest people that I've ever met, and that I'm, every day I'm grateful to be working with them, as cheesy as that sounds. So you might be wondering, why are you listening to me talk to you about a remote team culture or building a remote team culture? Well, the thing is, when I started the company, the only thing that I knew for sure was the sort of culture that I wanted. I didn't know a lot of things, but that was the one thing that I did know. And back then, I didn't even know that team culture was a thing, and it was a term. So clearly, I was very well prepared, not. But yet, after all this time, it still remains one of the most important things to me. So in the last 5 years, I have spent a lot of time thinking about team culture. Actually, the last 5 years kind of looked a bit more like this. In that, there were quite a few really awesome, memorable moments, and there were a lot of mistakes that were made as well, like a lot of mistakes. But through the ups and downs and the twists and turns, what I got out of it was just a lot of lessons. So that's what I'm going to talk to you guys about, is the 10 strategies that I have learned through the years for building a kick-ass, awesome remote team culture. So the first problem that you might encounter in trying to build a good team culture is, hey, it's already tough enough and now no one's in the same room. And so to try and counteract that, your first strategy is to get familiar with the terrain. So it's really easy to want to build a good team culture. Everyone wants that. Whether you're a remote organization or not a remote organization, but do you actually know what you're up against? Do you know what's working for you? Do you know what's working against you? So why is good team culture so tough to get right? Well, the first thing is that it's inherently really difficult. And the reason why is because it is intangible, it is very subjective, it evolves over time, and even if you've gotten it right, its experience is really open to interpretation. This means that one person can experience the same culture completely different from someone else. So I asked a bunch of friends around, and they all gave me really different answers, ranging from something that's very detailed and very structured, to people just focusing on one aspect, like communication, to others being like, I have no clue, I don't know where to start thinking about this. So a lot of the common mistakes or misconceptions that I hear about would be the first being that culture is something that just happens organically. The second is that, oh, okay, we should start thinking about culture because things don't seem that great. The third is that culture is all about fun, it's all about having good times, it's all about playing foosball. The fourth is that, okay, I'm just going to spend a week of my time trying to set everything up for a good team culture, and now I'm done. Okay, it's done, it's finished. And then the last one is that I have to be the person to constantly enforce the culture, or it's never going to happen. All of these, not quite right, and I will go into that a little bit later. But first I want to talk a little bit about why being remote makes it trickier. So obviously, with remote and no one is in the same room, you know how you walk into a cafe or into a restaurant and you know, you sort of get a sense for what the place is like. It sort of gives you this vibe. You can do the same thing with an office, but if you're in a remote team and you don't have a physical space, how do you create that? And when you don't have easy access to the rest of your team and your teammates, how can you create a culture? How do you assess how everyone's feeling, what morale is like, how, if there is any camaraderie within the team? So any issues that you get with working remotely, whether it's through collaboration, through communication, or anything else, these are all things, issues that will make any team culture problems worse. So, now that we've talked about all the things that's difficult about it, what does good team culture actually look like? So you remember this big list of nopes. So talking about culture just happening organically? Absolutely not. It is something that is intentionally done. It has to be thought about, planned about, strategized, and executed. Next thing is that good culture is built into the foundation of the team from day one. The next is that culture is very much not just about having the good times, which is of course important, but it's also about how you handle the bad times. And the next is that good culture must be consistently and constantly maintained. It is something that will never ever be done. And the last one is that good culture should have buy-in from the entire team. You should not have to enforce it, and everyone should be able to agree and be on the same page about this without you standing over there and being like, you have to agree to this culture. So, to elaborate a little bit more on exactly what good culture will consist of, it means having everyone believe in the same values and attitudes. It means that people feel like they belong to something that's bigger than them. It means that they find purpose in what they're doing. And at least most of the time, they like their team members. They have to feel safe. And they have to overall experience more good times than bad times. So, add all of that up and the remote aspect of stuff, everyone has to feel in a remote setting that their teammates are accessible, that they feel familiar and that they're comfortable. And the whole team should feel united even though they're miles apart. And that they have a place somewhere, even though there's no physical location, there's no desk, there's no office. They should still feel like there's a spot for them on the team, they belong to something bigger than just them. So I've talked a lot about the challenges to overcome, and there are quite a few of them. But I will say that there are some things that are in your favor, in that if you don't have an office space, it's really hard for someone to steal your sandwich, or it's really hard for someone to stink up your cubicle with farts if you guys are miles apart. So a couple of good things there. So the next problem is, what exactly creates a good environment that people will want to be a part of? Which brings us to strategy number 2, is understanding what your team wants. So it's one thing to create something, it's another thing to get buy-in and to get people to want it. So as you might know, the adoption of something will never succeed unless you actually understand your target audience. So when it comes to businesses, you have your product market fit. When it comes to teams, you have your team member culture fit. It sounds a bit less snappy, but you get the gist of it. So the first point is, what do people want in their work? People leave high-paying jobs all the time. And often it's not because they're not being paid enough. So while money is important, it's not the be-all and end-all. And them leaving could span across a bunch of different reasons, from feeling unheard, feeling unappreciated, being really frustrated by poor communication, feeling like they're not progressing anymore, bad management is a really big, really common one, and then a toxic environment. And all these things, most of these things, can be fixed by a good culture, to an extent. It's not that easy to fix, I'm well aware, but let's look at them a little bit more. So the answer seems relatively straightforward, whether it's easy to execute or not, and that's something else. So feeling unheard, obviously, take some time to listen to them. Feeling underappreciated, explicitly say what you appreciate about them, or tell them that they're doing a good job if they're doing a good job. The next one is communicate clearly and frequently, and this should happen across the team. Spend time investing into their development, into their progress, talk to them about their goals, set these things up together. Bad management, manage them well. Again, I know it sounds like I'm thinking that it's really simple. I know that it's not, but you know what the answer is, even if it's hard to get there. And then the last one is a toxic environment. Maybe attend a talk on how to create a good team culture and environment. So, like I said, of course, all these things are not easy to do, but now you know what's important to work on and what it is that people are actually after. So you can find ways to build this into your team, into your organization, and into your culture. So the next thing is, why do so many people want to work remotely? Obviously, I don't need to tell you about the statistics behind the remote working boom, but kind of really want to. So 90% of remote workers plan on working remotely for their entire career. 94% encourage others to work remotely. And it's estimated that over 50% of the workforce in the US will be working remotely by 2020. So those are obviously really huge numbers. At Melewi, we've been hiring and working remotely pretty much from day one. And every time we've put out a job posting, we've gotten like hundreds of applicants, which is really awesome to see. For quite a few of those roles, we've actually hit well over 700 applicants, which does take a while to go through. So it really does seem like everyone's interested in remote working. And a lot of the reasons that we hear would be the want for autonomy, it would be them being really tired of the 9-to-5 routine, they want more flexibility, they want more time with their family, or they really want to travel because it's fun. So it seems really logical if you're trying to build a compelling team culture, to build some of these or all of these things into what you have. And the last point here is that remote working has a lot of benefits, but it's not all fun and games. There are things that are inherently just difficult about it. So every remote worker will face their own set of challenges, but you have a couple that seem to pop up a lot more than the other challenges do. And the biggest one that I've found by far is feeling isolated. So while there isn't a simple solution for that, what can you do to help with some of these challenges to make sure that you have a team culture that addresses these hard things? So on to problem number 3. What does your awesome team culture look like? So the strategy is define your culture. So now we know that team culture is subjective, and we've talked about what your team would want. And it's very easy to say, okay, we're going to build a great team culture, but can you define explicitly what that looks like to you and what that will look like to everyone else? So the first thing to do is to find the heart of your team culture, so find your why. So here you have my poorly drawn onion-shaped sketch. You can see that in the very center, it's the why, and then the layer on top of that would be your values, on top of that attitudes, and then the last one would be behaviors. So it is kind of like an onion, in that at the very center of things you have the why. So when you're talking about the why, the question that you should be asking is, why are you doing what you're doing? And if you're not already familiar with this, you should check out Simon Sinek. He does a way better job of explaining this than I do. And next is your values. So this is, once you know your why, it will be a lot easier to sort of figure out your values. And again, this is the judgment of what's important to you. From there, once you have your why, once you have your values, now we're talking about the attitude. So attitude is just a way of thinking or feeling about something. And again, this is something that you should put down explicitly. And then the last point that we have on top of everything else that sort of brings everything together would be the behaviors. So the way that you would conduct yourself, especially in relation to someone else. And it should be, again, everyone should be on the same page across the board, from why to your values, to your attitudes, to your behaviors. And that's kind of what keeps everyone together. So obviously, it's great to know what it is that you want. But what's even better is if you know what you want and what you don't want. And I find that a lot of the times people get really stuck trying to figure out what it is that they want. But what people tend to feel a lot clearer about is what they don't want. So if you get stuck on figuring out what you want, just start with what you don't want, put that all down, and over time you'll find that it's easier and easier to understand what it is that you do want. And once you have those two lists, then it's much easier to pursue all the things that you do want, and also to stay away from the things that you don't want, and not, cave and compromise into something that you don't want to have. So the next thing is, how should your values, your whys manifest? What are the corresponding attitudes and behaviors that you should have? So once you have your values down, that's great, awesome first step. But the thing is that anyone can claim anything. They can claim that they love feedback, they can claim that they're a great team player, they can claim that they're super punctual. But them behaving accordingly is really what matters at the end of the day. So they have to live up to what it is that they're claiming. So it's not enough to have those values, you have to make sure that you have the corresponding attitudes and corresponding behaviors that actually live up to what it says. So some of the things to think about is, how should your team be interacting with each other? How should your team be interacting with you? How should they be interacting with people outside of the team, from clients to contractors to press to just the general public? How should the team handle any sort of conflict or differences? And I will say that with a remote working setup, you will have, of course, challenges that come with it. One of the awesome things about remote working is that it pretty much defaults to diversity, in that it's a lot easier to be diverse because the world is sort of your oyster. That said, sometimes when you have lots of different people from different places, there'll be misunderstandings that arise just from having different viewpoints, having grown up in different places and different cultures. So how should your team handle these culture clashes? That's also something to think about, that's something to put down, and that's something to sort of prep for. So other things to ask yourself, or rather to sum up all the things that you should be asking yourself, is how should the team handle when things are good, when things are busy, when things are not busy, and when things are bad. So don't just focus on one, go across the spectrum. The last point is to codify your culture. And really this just means to keep it somewhere that anyone can revisit, and that place is not in your head. So it's all about explicitly communicating those values that you spent time thinking about and developing, and also the corresponding attitudes and behaviors. You have to put them somewhere visible so that you can revisit them, so that anyone on your team can revisit them, and you should always be referring to them whenever you're trying to make decisions. You can use them to help you assess if you are sticking to your values, whether it is trying to decide on a business strategy, or it's trying to decide on who to hire. So as an example, these are some of the values that we have, and we have them put down in many different places, from job listings to our onboarding guide to some of our canvases that we review every quarter or every half a year. And we just make sure that it's really visible all the time, and at any point in time if you want to look at them, you absolutely can. So the next problem that we have is, you might say to yourself, oh, this person is so good at their work, but somehow it's just not really working out. So strategy number 4 is to find the right people based off the right criteria. So when you're hiring, it's really easy to focus on a person's experience, their work history. They might be just really, really, really good at what they do. But have you spent time trying to figure out if they're a good fit for your team, if they will add to your team culture, or will they actually bring it down? So we all know that hiring is tough, but obviously hiring great people is even tougher. So you can't just sort of sit back and wait for amazing people to fall into your lap. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. The best people have to be won over. You have to pitch your candidates. So what I find is that too many job postings sound as though they're doing candidates a favor by making a job available. It's very lazy, it's very, we have this and you do this, and if you want to apply, do all these things, great. It's not very inspiring, it's not very compelling. And it will most definitely not attract the best to you. The thing is about the best people is that they will of course have options, many options available to them. How can you be pitching your team and your organization to be the best culture and the best option for them? So this is a job listing that we've put out. It hasn't changed since 2013, which is when we started. And the reason why it hasn't changed is because we have seen a lot of success with it. And the main reason I think behind that is that it was written when we were putting it together. It was very much okay, what is a job listing I would love to come across, I would love to apply for, that I would love to be a part of. And so we put in things like what we believe in, we pitch them on what working with us looks like, we say very explicitly what we're looking for, past just what the role requires, but also we talk about, we say specifically, we're looking for people who loves collaboration, believes in building relationships over, hard selling. We talk about how we want someone with a great attitude, no ego, we want someone who's a team player. So we have said very specifically all these different traits that tie in with our values past just what the role entails. So next point is, how do you assess if this person is the right fit for you? So like I said, a good team culture is really about having everyone be aligned. You need them to really be on the same page. It doesn't have to be on absolutely everything, on how to format a document or how to solve something, but it should be on the important things. The disagreement is not a bad thing to have, but you have healthy disagreement and unhealthy disagreement. So you need them to be on the same page, but this doesn't mean that you need them to be the same. So diversity, like I said, is really awesome to have, and the Melewi team is made out of very different people from different countries, different cultures, different lifestyles. We are a pretty diverse group, and it's a lot of fun. And at the end of the day, even if we're all from different places and different points in our lives, we all share the same values, and we all share the same attitudes. And at the end of the day, that's really what matters. So as cheesy as it sounds, it's not really about the outside, it's about what you believe on the inside. And I'm done with the cheesiness, I think. So when you're interviewing potential candidates, you should be asking them questions like, what do you look for in a team that you enjoy working with? What is the most ideal way to work with you? What is the most important thing to you in a work environment, alongside the other questions that you might have. And then once you have talked to them about that, and once you've heard what they've had to say, then you can measure it up against your lists of want and don't want, so that you can assess them better. So once you've kind of done that, the next thing you'd want to do is to try and validate your decision. So how can you make sure that this person is the right one? So again, like I said, somebody can be really, really talented, but the thing is, if they don't fit your culture, then it doesn't really matter. They might be hard to pass off because their work is just that good, but at the end of the day, if somebody is going to pull down your culture, then they are just simply not compatible. And everything that you do, you should work really hard to protect that. So to give you a bit more insight into what it is that we do, our hiring process contains a video introduction. So if you are applying to join us, besides your CV and your other documents, you should be including a video introduction where you tell us a little bit more about yourself. And this helps us to get a glimpse of what this person is like. And it also helps us to go from 700 applications into 24 that make it through to 2 interview sessions, 2 interview rounds. The first round is looking at team culture. So here's where we ask a lot of the questions about their values, their behaviors, their previous experiences, what's important to them, what they like, what they don't like, to try and see if they fit the team. And then if they make it through that interview, the second one is to talk more about the role and asking questions more to do with their experience. And if they make it through those 2 interviews, then what we have is a 1-week paid working trial. So this is where the candidate gets to come in, work with the team for a week on an internal project that we create, and they get to meet and interact with the rest of the team. They get to try working with them on something, and this just really helps to validate what it is that they say, the way that they say that they are. But it also gives the team a chance to have some input into who might be joining them and who they might be working with. Once we have that, we have a 6-month probation to which we have a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of reviews, just to, again, really make sure that things are going okay. And what we have found is the 1-week trial has made by far the biggest difference for us. We've iterated this process over the years, and this is where we're at now, and we found the biggest difference to be the 1-week trial. And that's because we find that anyone can say anything in interviews. It's 2 hours of talking. But will they actually live up to what they claim? So, on to the next problem number 5. You might be saying at some point, they don't really seem to be fitting into the team. What's wrong? So, strategy number 5 is to onboard them right. And here I'm talking specifically into the team. So, as we know, starting a new job somewhere is daunting and confusing, but when you're joining a remote team, it's extra daunting and extra confusing. And the main reason is because interaction requires initiative and intention. So starting relationships can really be difficult because you can't just turn to someone or join in a conversation or join in on people to go to lunch, and sort of those relationships just happen by having close proximity. Here in a remote team, you have to be the one to start a conversation. You have to be the one to introduce yourself. You have to be the one to, have a chat, suggest a call. It requires quite a lot of effort, and it requires also effort to get over maybe any apprehension that you have or any nerves that you might have. So onboarding someone right is absolutely one of the most important things that you can do for them and your overall team culture. So every moment that your new hire has, your new person has, starts out with onboarding. So your onboarding sets the tone for every moment that they have moving forward. So it's really important to get them started right. So obviously you should be welcoming, you should be thorough in your information and your explanations. You should introduce them to the team warmly and not just be like, oh, okay, here's John, he's going to be doing marketing, great. Take the time, make them feel comfortable, get the team sort of warmed up as well. And you can also get their help to pitch in with the onboarding. So your team, they're probably the best people that you could get to give the most accurate picture of what the team culture is like, what the business is like, what the company is like. So why not get their help, right? Another thing that you can do as well is to encourage people to communicate with each other. So what happens is, in a remote setting, is that if you've been the point of contact this entire time, you are the most familiar person to them. And so it's very easy to just default to asking you questions and not talk so much to their new team members. And so it becomes a very, very, very slow ramp up on that relationship if it even forms in the first place. So by encouraging everyone on the team to get to know each other and this new person who's joined, this will really help kickstart those relationships. So one of the things that we do is that we have an onboarding guide that we go through with every single new person, and it's just filled to the brim with information that they need to know, that they might want to know, and anything else that might be useful, even if it doesn't pertain specifically to the role or to the company. This could be things like talking about taking care of their health, whether it's physical or psychological or emotional. This could also talk about the challenges of working remotely and how to remedy some of these things. Anything that you think will help them transition into the team will definitely be welcome. So the next point is to kickstart relationships by very intentionally breaking the ice. So one of the things that we do is that in week 1 of a new person joining the team, we set up individual chats for them with every single person on a team. So what we're doing here is to create opportunities for this new person to get to know everyone else. So outside of just like a big group call where everyone's laughing, joking, and this new person's feeling a bit like, oh, I don't know if I should chime in, should I say something? It's a completely different environment, and it's not one that really starts a relationship. The first step that we're trying to do here is really to make things more familiar, to start out that process of feeling familiar and comfortable with someone or with everyone on your team. So another thing that we do as well is that we get other team members to make sure that they feel welcome, to talk to them, to help them through a couple of things, help them get set up. So everyone on the team chips in, and that contributes to them feeling like, oh, they're actually part of this team. All right, on to problem number 6. So now that you've got them set up with the team, you've come across possibly another frustrating point, which is that, oh, they don't seem to be working very well with me. This is frustrating for me, it's frustrating for them, I'm sure the rest of the team are frustrated as well, this is not great. So the strategy is to onboard them right with you. So as you might know, nothing ruins an exciting new job faster than a poor relationship with a manager. And on the flip side, nothing is more frustrating than a team you can't manage successfully. So the very first thing to do is to create visibility, to tell them explicitly how it is that you work. So again, getting on the same page makes a huge difference. You kind of want to start that out right. There's no point being, or rather it's not going to work out if you're really good at what you do, they're really good at what they do, but then you guys just can't work together. So the thing about a remote setting is that you can't really observe. People are not around for you to observe how they do things, what things they like, what things they don't like, how they operate, all the things that you don't typically explicitly say out that you would observe in a real world setting, you don't have in a remote setting. So what you really want to do is to make anything that's unnoticeable and invisible very explicit and very available. And anything that you can do to prevent confusion, to prevent frustration, will result in a better relationship. So one of the things that I do with my team, for any new person that joins the team, is I go through my working style. So this is just a bit of a guide on how I work, why I work, and how to respond to that. So it goes across a couple of categories, from communication to management to standards to a working relationship to even personal quirks about me. And this is just meant to sort of give them that information that they otherwise could spend, a year or more observing or not observing. So as an example, one of the things that I have is that I give feedback as much as I can, and I explain my reasons for it. It's not that I'm trying to be mean or I'm trying to bring someone down. It really is that it comes from this me valuing progress and constantly getting better. And so I give feedback because I believe that it's about getting a better end result, not about bringing someone down. And so with that, I've also put down, okay, this is how you should respond to my style of working. It's not that I am trying to personally criticize or that you're doing a poor job. It's really about telling you how you can get even better, how can you get a better end result. And also included in that would be, like I said, a couple of like personal quirks. So it really is about some of the things that, again, you won't observe, some of the things that maybe team members might not tell you because it's not really a work thing to talk about. So as an example, I'm not really a morning person. I just don't like it. I just don't function very well. It's not going to be a productive call if you book something with me at 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. or 7 a.m., God forbid. That's just not going to be effective. So, probably don't do it. And I explain a bit why as well, and a couple of other things. So this is just, again, trying to make sure that we're on the same page, and that you're not suddenly surprised that, hey, I'm not really very happy in a morning call, and I will just be so much better at what we're meant to discuss if you sort of book it in the afternoon. So the next thing is to make onboarding agile. So this really just means to keep checking in, keep making sure things are on track, and if you're not, you can fix it. So checking in with your new hire is vital. Again, like I said, in a remote team, it's not that easy to ask for help. And because you can't observe, it's also quite difficult to learn by imitation. So any sort of one-on-ones that you have with them or that they have with their manager is really crucial. So intentionally staying in touch makes a really big difference. Schedule that in, whether it is one week away or it recurs every 4 weeks. And when you do so, make sure that anything that they do that's on the right track, you affirm and you tell them, hey, this is the right track. Again, it comes back to the visibility thing. If they can't look over and see, okay, my teammates are doing this, so it must be right, and I'm doing the same thing, and so that must be right, okay, I'm on track. They can't see that, so it's hard for them to ever feel sure unless they're being told quite specifically that they're on the right track. And then, of course, it's the same thing with anything that might be taking them off course. So you have the opportunity to just correct them or help them out if they're not doing the right thing. And this really just prevents any issues from snowballing. So on to problem number 7. When you look at your team or a specific teammate and they seem lost and alone, and you can kind of feel their morale plummeting. So strategy number 7 is to help them understand how to work and how to work together. So like I said, lack of visibility is always a problem in remote settings. Usually you pick up a lot of things by observing, and you don't have to be told explicitly. But of course, it's very limited in a remote setting. So visibility is really a problem that you solve by having constant contact, and again, saying things very specifically, even things that you normally wouldn't, or that might feel a bit weird or a bit uncomfortable. So the first thing to do is to set their desk up for them. It's really just telling them what it is that they need to know. So in an office setting, this is not really tough, right? You have like physical items, physical spaces. You can say, here's the copier machine, here's the coffee machine, here's your desk, here's my desk. But in a remote setting, of course, you don't have the same thing. But the thing is, they still need to get access to tools to do stuff, to work on things. They need to know what it is that everyone's using. They need to know what it is that they have to do. And also, they need to be able to find things, find information. So spend some time to show them around so that they don't feel lost. You don't have to be in a physical space that you don't know to feel lost. You can be equally feeling lost at home, sitting at your desk, if you don't know what's happening around you. So again, one of the things that we include in our onboarding guide is where to find the different tools, who to go to for information, so that they don't have to wonder, okay, what should I be doing now and how do I get here, and I'm asking too many questions and oh, that's not great. So give them that information, set them up right. So next point, second point is a very big point that I'm not going to be able to cover all of within this one talk, but it's about having a good remote work setup across the organization. So the thing is, if people don't work well together because they haven't found a way to work together and be, again, on the same page, there can be a lot of friction that comes from that. If someone gets in the way of you being able to do your job, that's not a good feeling, and that's going to make you pretty unhappy. So if you get people working in a similar way or similar enough that they can work well together, then that reduces quite a lot of friction. A lack of unpleasant surprises means less friction. And everyone being able to do their job without any unnecessary obstacles makes for a much better work experience. And this really means that they will have fewer chances to dislike their teammates, and that really matters. So some of the things that we do is that we explicitly put down processes across different verticals. We say, this is labeling convention. We have reminders going. This is the stand-up link. Again, more workflows. Again, more reminders that recur all the time, and we don't need somebody to every day just be like, oh, please, upload your files to Dropbox. Again, more instructions so that everyone can just find what it is that they're looking for, and you don't have to be asking questions like, where did you put this, and I can't find this, and why is this labeled really weirdly, I don't know which file is which. You want to set things up to prevent that sort of confusion, unnecessary confusion, from happening. So the third thing is to tell them what is expected of them outside of their role. So their role is really straightforward, achieve that quota or do a really good job on this or design really well, but there's more to that that's actually expected of them. So anytime you have a lot of room for error, especially in a remote setting where these errors might go undetected and unnoticed for a long period of time, you have to be as explicit and as specific as possible. I know I've said these two words a lot, but then that's how you know that it's really important to get right. So you want to talk about details that you might take for granted in an office setting. If you were all in the same space, you wouldn't bother to talk about it because it's pretty easy to see, it's pretty easy to tell. So these would be things like, okay, if you're going to take a video call, you want to show up a bit early, make sure there's no background noise, use earphones, try not to take it on the go. You talk about stuff like, okay, if you're traveling, then you want to make sure that you double check your internet, that you have power available. All these things, you should have them explicitly put down, because if you don't, then the requirement or the expectation is simply like, I'm just going to show up for a call. Doesn't matter the quality, doesn't matter that my video's on, doesn't matter that my internet is really choppy, doesn't matter that there's honking going on in the background. If those things matter, say it. So another thing that we include in our onboarding guide is that we talk about the pros and cons of remote working. We talk about some of the issues that pop up, and we also talk about how to resolve them. So problem number 8, I've got the right team, I've set them up well, but it feels like there's a slow decline happening. So the strategy for that is to create a system to maintain the culture sustainably. The thing about getting people to remember to do stuff is that at some point they will forget. So if you require people to remember things, it will eventually fail because people will always forget. Totally not speaking from my own experience. It's really easy for things to fall off the radar, and if it's important, you obviously don't want that to happen. The thing about culture is that it requires constant and consistent effort, so you don't want that to fall off the radar. And it has to happen across every single team member and not just you. Remember, you're not the one enforcing a culture. There has to be buy-in. It is a team effort, even if you're leading the way. So if you create a system that exists outside of your head and that doesn't require initiative, that is the only sustainable way that you're going to be able to maintain your culture. So the first thing is to create the system, keep it going. Anytime you're really motivated, it's easy to make things happen. You have that energy going on. But at some point, that motivation is not going to be there forever. So what happens then? That's where creating the system comes in. It prevents relying on people to do things, to be motivated, to start things, take initiative, to remember anything. One of the things that we do is to have recurring catch-ups scheduled in. So this just recurs, it never stops, there's no end to it, it happens automatically, and it doesn't require someone to come in to be like, I'm going to put in a time for everyone to catch up now. It's just there. So whether it's a quick daily catch-up, or you have a topic-specific call that happens once every month. So it could be, for example, a learning exchange, which is something that we have once every 2 weeks. Whenever you create a system, this just really means that the important things don't get forgotten. So for us, it would be our daily team stand-up that happens at 3 p.m. Singapore time every single day, Monday to Friday. You never miss it, you never forget. No matter what time zone you're in, it sticks to this time. So we have everyone on the team there, again, Mondays to Fridays, again, same time, 3 p.m. Singapore time. Rain or shine or snow or hail or, okay, maybe typhoon would be an exception, but you make it there. It's something that's consistent and constant, and it's quite hard to forget because it has become a habit. So another thing to think about is besides having calls, and yeah, not everyone likes having a ton of calls and a ton of meetings, but information should sit somewhere, especially if it's information that you're going to talk about, park for a bit, and then come back to a month later. It should always sit somewhere. So think of it almost as your meeting room for that specific topic, whether it's sales, marketing, design, management. And it should always be accessible to anyone at any time. This really keeps your meetings, your calls, your conversations from degenerating into fluff, because you're like, oh, what did we discuss the last time? And I don't remember what you said, but somebody said something, and I don't remember anymore. Obviously not great. So this will really help, and it also reduces any reliance on any tacit knowledge, so anything that sort of sits in someone's head, or someone's memory, because let's face it, everyone forgets stuff. I definitely forget stuff a lot. So the way that we do things, again, we use things like real-time board, we put down a process, we use Google Documents to track what we've been catching up on. Our one-on-ones, again, sit on Google Documents. We have everything put into InVision for the design projects. Just everything sits somewhere so that it's not reliant on any one person being there at that point in time. All right, the second thing is to make space for having fun. I think with every good team culture, remote or not remote, it's about having a couple of laughs together, it's about having fun, it's about sharing a couple of jokes. And if you are making time to catch up on work, you're making time to go through a project review, you should also be making time for having a little bit of fun. So whether it is, for us, having really silly stand-ups, so this is silly hat stand-up, to I was hopping on a call and watching Leonardo DiCaprio win his first Oscar, I think that's what it is, together, which was a big moment, to having sunglasses stand up. I think we were running out of ideas at that point, to just having funny GIF battles on Slack, to people like putting together playlists to recommend, to having Slackbot reminders to talk about stuff good things that have happened, things to celebrate, things to be happy about, to having a shared Spotify playlist so that everyone can add their favorite songs. And the last one is to, every once in a while, like bring your cute baby into stand up. But the point is just having that space and having that time, and I think having that permission to have fun with your team, joke around. You don't have to be in the same physical location to be able to share a lot of inside jokes with someone and to have fun. So again, it doesn't have to take up a lot of time, but the thing is that it has to be consistent. Again, it shouldn't require initiative. And it has to be mandatory. It sounds really weird to force someone to join in to have fun. But the thing is, it's not that you must have fun, but it's more of like, hey, you must be there when the team's getting together for this. And you know, if you're there for work, why are you not there for the non-work stuff that's just as important, even though it's not specific to like a project, for example? And really what this does is that it just allows everyone some space and permission to have a chat, have a laugh, do all the things that you might do in a real office, in the pantry, at the water cooler, things that just sort of occur naturally that don't have as much of an opportunity in a remote setting. So the last thing is how to handle bad times. Make it a rule to talk things out, to reflect, to do whatever it is, however it is that you want to mitigate any problems or any conflict. So, as you know, good times will always come with bad times, unfortunate truth of life. You have to put down a method for conflict resolution. So you have that, and then if it can't be resolved, then you need to have a bar for when conflict should be escalated. So when should you bring this to someone else? If you focus only on a culture that's built off just having fun, when shit hits the fan, it really won't be fun. And that obviously is going to be detrimental to your team culture. So at Melewi, if we have any issues, we bring it up, we arrange a video call to talk it through, and if we think that someone might get really emotional about this, because we're all human, it happens, we bring a moderator into the call, someone to sort of like make sure that, you know, everyone's given a fair chance to talk, that people are listening, that at the end of the day, it's really about finding that resolution and coming to a point where there's that shared understanding or there's a solution. And if in that call the matter isn't resolved or people are too upset, then we book in another call to discuss it further. The point is that you should make sure that issues are resolved and that you don't let it fester. So following up makes a big difference. Being frustrated, having problems, it just does not go away on its own. So you need to make sure that your culture has a way to include bad times. All right, problem number 9. So everything works, team culture feels great, but it's all resting on my shoulders. And I feel like we can't scale without me going insane because I just can't handle it anymore. So strategy number 9 is to iterate the system to scale up without you going crazy. So your team culture shouldn't start and stop with you. You might find that you've become the bottleneck, and you probably find this across many different areas of the business or the organization, but as well as team culture, you might find that you're the bottleneck or that it starts and stops with you, right? And that typically happens if you've become everyone's main and or only touch point. That's not a good place to be at. So in the office, in an office setting, usually the problem that you have with being a bottleneck is the problem of tacit knowledge. So something that only sits in your head, that requires you to be there in order for someone else to be able to do what they need to do. In a remote setting, you have this same problem, and you also have the problem that you're the most visible and the most familiar point of contact, which means that everyone comes to you, and because they can't see that, you know, you're doing a billion different things and trying to answer a billion different questions, that them bringing one more, which to them is one, is like a billion and one to you. So the first thing to do is to create a system outside of you and have other people make things happen. So, you know, this is an example of a not a great way to do things. You can see that you're the center of the team culture. So you can see that you're the center of the team culture and that you're the main point of contact for everyone. But just because you've created this culture doesn't mean that you should be at the center of it. It's called team culture, not you culture. So what instead you should be doing is that you're the one that drives forward the values and let that be the foundation. So you lead by example, but you're not at the center of it. What you really have to do is to foster those connections and let everyone contribute. And the thing is, the culture will evolve, and it's your job just to keep it on track, aligned, and alive. The next point is that culture evolves, so you have to revisit and iterate regularly. So every year we do a wash-up meeting at the end of the year where we spend time to recap, we spend time to reflect, and then from there, whatever it is that we're doing, we iterate and we evolve. And as more people join the team, and as the company grows, so must your culture. It can't stay the same. If you try and keep it the same, you'll be left trying to enforce a culture that is outdated, that nobody buys into. And that's not a good team culture anymore. So, problem number 10, last one. Is it me, or is it incredibly tough leading a team, remote or not? And the answer is no, it's not just you. It is tough to lead any team, whether it's remote or not. So the strategy for that is to be the best remote leader that you can be. And there's more to this sentence. So, like I said, leading is tough. It's especially tough in a remote setting. So here are some tips. The first thing is to stay true to you. Don't pretend to be something that you're not. So if you're creating a culture that you don't believe in, or you're creating a culture that should be this way, it's not going to last. At the end of the day, this really is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And it's one that you should enjoy for most parts being part of, whether it's running the business, managing the team, having this team culture. So you have to stay true to what you believe in while, of course, always striving to improve. The second point is to take care of your team. So everyone looks to you through their screens because it's a remote setting. But the thing is that you're leading the way. And while that's tough and while that's tiring, your team is really looking to you for direction. So you have to look out for their best interests because they're putting their trust into you and into the organization. So you have to care about them, you have to listen to them, you should try and empathize with them, and you should always keep trying to get better as a leader. And this means that you should be available, you should be visible, and the thing about remote working is that it's tough to see and be able to observe when somebody's having a hard time. And so you have to pay extra close attention because asking someone if they're okay for the millionth time might be a little bit annoying. It is way better than missing out on somebody just having a really tough time. And one of the things as well about, again, leading or managing anything, whether remote or not, is that repeating yourself will be something that you just cannot avoid. And it's even more crucial when it's in a remote setting. So the last point is that you have to also take care of you. So in some ways, the buck does start and stop with you, so you have to take care of yourself. You cannot be a good leader if you're constantly stressed out and burnt out, a lesson that I have learned way too many times and is still learning and trying to get a hang of. And like I said, the thing that you're trying to do, whether you're a founder, co-founder, you're a boss, you're a manager, it's just inherently really, really tough. And even if things are really good and things are going really, really well, at some point, it will get hard again. So one of the things that I found, this is kind of like my Bible, it's a piece by Ben Horowitz. It's talking about the most difficult CEO skill, which is just really about managing your psychology. If you haven't seen it, highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's the one thing that I go to all the time whenever I'm finding things really challenging. So again, with being a leader, and especially in a remote setting, at some point you're going to feel alone, especially if you're leading remotely. So one of the things that I did was I actually put out a Twitter poll asking managers of remote teams what the toughest challenge was that they faced. And it was a third, loneliness and psychology, and the number of comments and replies and private messages that I got based off that was astounding. It was clearly something that just really resonated with people, including people that you never would imagine would say something like, oh, I'm having a hard time feeling really isolated. So tough times happen, and any taboo that you might hear about it not being okay is bullshit. You should talk to someone, whether it's a friend, a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. Talk to someone about it. And if you're remote working or you're a nomad, you also have remote options. So explore them, because at the end of the day, support is really important, especially if you're doing something that is just challenging. So finally, at the end, the takeaway, if I could leave you with one thing to remember, is the formula for good team culture is having everyone be aligned on values, attitudes, and behaviors, and to reduce any sort of friction, to have healthy ways to disagree, to have a lot of fun and good times, and finally, for everyone to feel like they belong to something bigger than them. So before we go, my team and I, we've been putting together a resource and a blog and an ebook for remote teams and remote businesses. So this is just sort of everything that we've learned, everything that we've tried out, and we're going to be putting as much insights as we can into this. So if you're interested, check it out, sign up. I promise you it will be useful, and if you don't find it so, feel free to tell me what would be useful. And with that, thank you.